A digital watermark is a machine-readable and covert identifier that upon embedding becomes part of the item itself. So a key there is machine-readable and covert as opposed to human visible and human readable. If I'm creating content and that content is allowed to be used without my consent or without my compensation, what is my motivation to continue to create content? I'm not an artist. Why should I care about copyright law? Because it's going to impact all of it. We are giving control to a handful of tech companies and state-sponsored bad actors unless we protect people's copyrights. That is a conclusion that's hard to escape.
Hi, I'm Craig Smith, and this is Eye on AI. Welcome to today's podcast where we delve into the fascinating world of digital watermarking with Riley McCormack, CEO of Digimarc. From protecting artist creations on the internet 30 years ago to securing global currencies, as generative AI gains prominence, how does watermarking secure the digital future? Stay tuned to unravel these insights and more. Hi. Good tech solves problems you know about. Great tech solves problems you haven't even thought about. What can the commerce platform trusted by millions of merchants do for you? It's time for Shopify, the commerce platform revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. Whether you're a garage entrepreneur or IPO ready, Shopify is the only tool you need to start, run, and grow your business without the struggle. Shopify puts you in control of every sales channel. So whether you're selling satin sheets from Shopify's in-person point of sale system or offering organic olive oil on Shopify's all-in-one e-commerce platform, you're covered. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the United States, and Shopify's truly a global force, powering Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across over 170 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/eyeonai. That's Shopify, shopify.com/eyeonai. That's EYEONAI, all run together. Go to shopify.com/eyeonai to take your business to the next level today.
Excuse me, sir. I couldn't help but overhear. Did you say Shopify? Oh, shopify.com/eyeonai. Carry on.
Thanks for having me on. My name is Riley McCormack. As you mentioned, I am the president and CEO of Digimarc. And my route to Digimarc was maybe a little bit different. So I've been an investor in technology for the last 25 years. And if you put the last 25 years of technology up against the last 2,500 years of almost any other industry, obviously it's the change, the revolution has been incredible. And so I've had operational roles to a certain degree, but nowhere near to the extent that I have here at Digimarc. And I actually came across Digimarc in 2014. As I mentioned, I've been in and around tech for 25 years. Absolutely love it, live, eat, breathe it. And a friend of mine talked about this company and this technology I'd never heard about called digital watermarking, and suggested I check it out. And that began the journey. So I started diving in. Digimarc historically had been a licensing company. The big contract with the central banks, which I'm sure will come up later in this conversation, but was really a licensing company and was starting to productize this technology. And so it was really a small community, I guess you could say, in certain ways. It was almost like the homebrew club for computing. So I was going to GS1 conferences in the basement of hotels in Washington, D.C., and just became more and more fascinated. Truly believe this technology can change the world. And so joined the board in 2020 and became CEO in 2021.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize, so that all predates, well, I mean, the transformer algorithm has been around since 2017, but really predates the gold rush in generative AI. I mean, what has captured a lot of people's imaginations in the last uh, 3 or 4 months in particular is the idea of uh, digitally watermarking text outputs from generative AI. And I've had conversations with people about statistical methods, and I'm hoping maybe we can talk about that. But Digimarc started before that. Are you? Uh, does Digimarc do digital watermarking for images only, images and text? Maybe explain what your tech does.
Yeah, so let's take a step back. We've been around for almost 30 years doing digital watermarking. So our founder actually was a astrophysicist as well as a photographer, and wanted to find a way to protect his images as he was posting them on this new thing called the internet. And how could he claim those images? How could he attribute them back to him? How could he show his copyright? So Digimarc's been around for almost 30 years. We are the pioneer and the widely recognized leader in digital watermarking. Our innovations and inventions in digital watermarking have been deployed at an unprecedented scale, many, many times larger than any other digital watermarking company, for a much longer duration, for such use cases as protecting movies. So the Blu-ray anti-piracy standard and the Digital Cinema Initiative, to measure TV and radio audiences as part of both Nielsen's and Arbitron's audience measurement services. Digimarc secured the credentials of the majority of the driver's licenses in the US, as well as secure credentials around the globe. And then, as I mentioned, our work with the central banks. So for 24 years, we've been working with a consortium of the central banks using our digital watermarks to protect the world's currency. So yes, to answer your question, we predate Gen AI in terms of digital watermarking. Our digital watermarks can be applied to anything that is digital, anything that is made from something digital or is digitally processed. So basically, the only thing we can't really do is things made by hand. So my kids' watercolors, actually, we could, after they create them, we could digitally process them and watermark them, or things made by Mother Nature.
Mhm. Yeah, and what I mentioned, digitally watermarking text, is that something that you do as well?
So our focus right now, text is going to be a difficult challenge for the whole world, right? Our focus right now is images, is audio, is video, and is documents. Because one of the things, and I'd love at some point to get into how we stopped looking at Gen AI as a adopter of it, or not stop, because we are going down that path, but also realizing the incredible productivity that it's going to bring, but as well as the risk, right? Every revolutionary technology changes the status quo. And so by changing the status quo, you unlock all this incredible positive, but you also open up potential negatives. And those negatives, those risks have to be addressed. We have, like I mentioned today, we have images and audio. We are working on getting out quickly video and documents, because there is no time to waste. I think one of the things that is important for people to understand is that every time you release a digital asset into the world that's unprotected, that's it, it's gone. So take this podcast, right? If you were to release it without Digimarc Validate, it's out there. It's going to be copied. It's going to be ingested by Gen AI engines. Um, you know, there will be multiple copies of it. But your ability to protect it and control it are gone. So we didn't want to wait for text before we came out with our product. We wanted to get out there what we could, because urgency. We felt a real urgency that time matters.
Yeah. So first, explain what digital watermarking means in the context of Digimarc, or what you've been doing, and then can you talk about how it's relevant to AI?
Yeah, that'd be great. And I think it's important not just to talk about what digital watermarking is, but also what it's not, because I think there's a lot of confusion about what digital watermarking is. So let me start out by talking about what digital watermarking is. So very high level, digital watermarking is the science of hiding information about an item in the item itself.
Mm.
And then some terms that are important to understand is the act of hiding that information is known as embedding the information, and the act of discovering that hidden information is known as detection.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's what digital watermarking is. A digital watermark is a machine readable and covert identifier that upon embedding becomes part of the item itself.
Mhm.
So a key there is machine readable and covert as opposed to human visible and human readable. And because it becomes part of the item, the identifier is immutable once it's been embedded. There's some other benefits, there's some other attributes. Because it's covert, it can be ubiquitous, which means it covers the totality of the item. So if it's an audio clip, it would run through the whole audio. If it's an image, it covers the whole image. And because of this ubiquity, as well as the signal itself, it's redundant, which means it can survive a lot of damage and still deliver its
Mhm.
message. And then finally, it's secure. So that's what a digital watermark is. If you don't mind, I'd love to spend a couple minutes on what's things that are not digital watermarks, but I think a lot of people confuse them as digital watermarks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So first of all, the idea of simply watermarking an item. Now notice I didn't use the word digital.
Mm.
This is hundreds of years old, and this refers to the actual literal process of adding water to an item to leave a mark, a water mark. So that's one thing where people get confused a little bit is in the physical world, if you have a really nice piece of stationery that has something you can read behind it, that's hundreds of years old technology. Now the idea of marking an item to put in a human readable, a human visible code has been applied to the digital world. For example, the images, the marks you will see in like stock photography vendors photos, right? So this is simply what I said though. This is a mark applied to a digital item. It is not a digital watermark. So let's go through our tests. These marks are not covert. They're meant to be read, right? That's why they're there. They're not immutable. In fact, when you pay a stock photography vendor for the right to use that photograph, they'll remove the watermark.
Mhm.
They're not ubiquitous, they're not redundant, and they're not secure. Okay. And then recently and confusingly, some companies have started calling the metadata attached to a digital item a digital watermark. This just isn't accurate. And when it comes to proving authenticity, which is where digital watermark, one of the things that digital watermarks can do in the world of Gen AI, it's actually quite dangerous. So the metadata attached to a digital item, it is covert, it is machine readable. So it passes those two tests. But really think about the metadata as almost a set of printed digital instructions that come along with an item in a box. So when you open medicine, you get your instructions. That's basically what metadata is. So it's not ubiquitous and it's not redundant. There's only one copy of these digital instructions, and they can't survive any damage. Moreover, that metadata can and often is severed from the digital item. So when you post an image to X, for example, X splits out that metadata. They just don't want to store it. There's nothing nefarious there.
Right.
So it's not immutable. It actually is often severed.
Mhm.
But this is where it gets really dangerous. And all of those issues, the lack of immutability, redundancy, ubiquity, those are concerning. The worst one is it's not secure. You can actually change the metadata, or a nefarious actor could change it. And one of the truisms, and again, we've been building massive multinational, multi-stakeholder, mission-critical systems of trust and authenticity for nearly 30 years. One of the truisms that runs through authenticity repeatedly is that false certainty is worse than uncertainty. And so the fact that using metadata as a way to give authenticity, but the metadata is easily changeable, it's not secure, that's worse. That could give false certainty, and false certainty is worse than uncertainty.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, on the digital watermarking that you guys do, yeah, can you describe? Presumably, you introduce some sort of a pattern in the pixels or in the histogram or something that can be read after the fact. But yeah, can you talk about how you do this?
Sure. Yeah, and it depends on the medium, right? So in audio, we're doing something in the audio channel. For images, you're right. It's a modulation of a pixel and a chrominance and luminance on a pixel by pixel basis. So what we're doing is we're putting an immutable, covert, machine readable, redundant, ubiquitous, and secure identifier. And it, we like I mentioned, we can work. One of the ways we're different from other digital watermarking, and there's multiple, but one of them is we can be applied, as I mentioned, to audio, to images, to video, and to documents.
Yeah. And how is that applied? Maybe you can take us through the tech.
The magic of software. Yeah. So multiple ways, but it comes down to just a software processing of the item, right? So audio we can do live, real time. We could be watermarking the audio in this conversation right now. Just software, and it's not even that compute or processing intensive or memory intensive. Same with images. It's just a processing uh, of a digital asset.
Right. And it's not having to do with the codec or how the data is compressed or something. I mean, can you think of an analogy? Maybe processing a photograph on a certain medium that's copyrighted, so that physical photograph cannot be separated from the medium on which it's printed. Or is it if you can try and explain to readers how it's done. I mean,
Specifically on images?
yeah, we can start with images. Yeah.
Sure. So our software will ingest a image, and then we will look at the way. And I'm probably going to get yelled at by my product and engineering people for misspeaking, or in attempts of simplification, misspeaking a little bit. It's a little more complicated than this. But we will look at that image. Our software will look at this image. Obviously there's no human interaction here. This is software to software, and then decide the best way to modulate the pixels, individual pixels, again, on both the chrominance and luminance, so both brightness as well as color, in the way that will make it the most imperceptible to the human eye, but still be, as clear as black and white to a machine.
Yeah. So pixel by pixel, meaning every pixel in an image is manipulated?
No, it doesn't need to be. Again, this is really smart software that we've spent 30 years looking at the ways to make it the most robust, the least visually impactful. So without getting into the magic of all of our software, no, it doesn't need to be. But what we do say is that it is covert, it is machine readable, it is immutable, it is ubiquitous, and it's redundant.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And how does this relate to registering digital assets on the blockchain?
Well, so just it doesn't need to have anything to do with distributed ledger, right? But it absolutely could, right? So again, what we are doing is we are putting an identifier into a digital asset via a digital watermark. So our digital watermark is an identifier of that digital asset. It can be read by machines. It is immutable. It is covert. Once you've identified anything, there's so many things you could do. So we have what we call our digital twins, which can convey authenticity, can convey provenance, can convey ownership. List it's extensible. It's an extensible digital twin, so the list is quite literally endless. We can also record all these interactions on distributed ledger, and we actually have in other parts of our business do work with a couple of distributed ledger technology. So think of it as less. They're different parts of the stack, right? What digital watermarking is doing is identifying something. Then it is using that identifier to convey information two ways, right? To get information from the digital twin to deliver it to whatever device just identified that item using a digital watermark. It can also send back, hey, I was just detected here. That's an option, which I think is important in a lot of the use cases we can talk about. How those interactions are recorded, whether it's a non-blockchain database or whether it's a chiseled in stone on distributed ledger, that's just a matter of where people want to send the data.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking this through as we're talking. So the blockchain, the advantage is that it's an immutable ledger of uh, that demonstrates ownership, right? So
There's other ways to do it. So absolutely. Yes, I'm sorry. Finish your, the answer is yes, but the answer is it's not the only way to do it.
yeah,
Or I guess that's what I say.
right. But just the NFT craze, for example, you come up with a digital asset, you register ownership or the purchase of it on the blockchain, and until there is another uh, transaction involving that digital asset that's registered on the blockchain, that represents uh, your title to the asset, right?
Yes.
And as that has nothing to do with watermarking. So you're taking, if we're referring to the NFT, that same digital asset, and you're processing so that it's watermarked, so that if anyone comes across or there's any use of that asset, you can show that it is the asset that you own, and then you can, if you have it registered on the blockchain, you can refer to that
Yeah.
ledger.
Yeah. It's actually an interesting example because stay tuned. Everything you're saying is right, except for the fact that while the blockchain um, records an immutable transaction or an ownership of that asset, how do you know that NFT that you're linking to is the actual NFT? It's a huge gap in in the NFT business. It's one that we can address. It's one that we are addressing. I would say stay tuned, but it's exactly that. The blockchain is an immutable ledger of transactions. Um, but how do you make sure the item in the digital world that you are claiming as a transaction, or that the transaction that you think is being recorded on the distributed ledger, is the right one? It's a very
Yeah. Well,
it's a wonderful insight, Craig, and stay tuned because
yeah,
there's a lot we can do with NFTs too.
yeah. It's. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I could never understand the NFT craze. I mean, it's
I know.
yeah.
Well,
You
I don't want to get into NFT craze because there's so many divisive issues in this world, and so I don't want to wade
yeah
into that one.
yeah
But I will say that the technology is not as secure as people think.
yeah
Uh, it's not a problem with the DLT. It's a problem of how do you make sure that that NFT is the one that is being
right
recorded. And
right
again, we have a solve for that.
right. So I have an image or a audio clip, and you watermark it for me. Then what can I do with that information or with that watermark?
Yeah. So today, the immediate solve that we're offering through a product called Digimarc Validate is protection of IP, protection of copyright, protection of brand equity. As I'm sure you're aware, and I'm sure your audience is aware intimately, um, the way these Gen AI engines are trained is by ingesting an incredible and fathomable amount of data, right? And there is a lot of lawsuits, concern, and these are really, really valid. I do want to spend some time on the risks. Um, what the Gen AI companies are claiming is it's fair use under copyright law, right? That is their out. Well, in 1997, there was an update to the copyright law called DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and it was a recognition of Congress that the copyright laws on the books left some gaps when it came to the
Mhm.
internet, right? This brand new thing called the internet. How do we update them? One of the new one of the updates to the copyright law through DMCA 1202B is the section, is the idea of CMI, of copyright management information,
Mhm.
and it makes it illegal to alter or to remove CMI. This is separate. This is outside of whether there's an infringement. This is if there is CMI in a digital asset and you alter it or you remove it, you're in violation of DMCA 1202B. and that's the U.S. law. There is similar law in multiple other countries. So as this debate, it is going to be a costly war. This billions and billion dollars of spend. It's going to probably reach the Supreme Court 20 times because on the fair use in terms of, well, is it a fair use in this case? Is it a fair use case? That's irrelevant because if you apply Digimarc Validate to your digital assets today, you can avail yourself of the protection of 1202B of the DMCA and similar laws in other countries, which have nothing to do with infringement. It's a separate redress from infringement. And there's actually case law that says digital watermarking is a valid, recognized conveyor of CMI. So that's where we're starting today with this. There's also, again, think about what we're doing. So we're putting an identifier, and in that case, that identifier is conveying copyright management information. It can also be used for authenticity. So we're a member of C2PA. I think that's a great organization. Because you can say, okay, this is, yes, Craig did put this asset out. This is Craig's asset. Going back to our conversation, for example, on metadata, without a digital watermark, you could put something out. I could go into the metadata, literally just delete, put in Riley. Now all of a sudden, hey, this is my asset, right? Or I could make something up and say, yeah, Craig put this out. So that's authenticity is the next step we're going to take on that. And then beyond that, it's really unlimited. We're in conversations with multiple partners, big tech companies, and the like, because once a digital asset is identified, there's so many other things you can do with it. So it's immediate copyright protection today. It's authenticity. And then let's see where our partners take this technology. We're really excited to begin that journey.
Yeah. Well, for example, on the generative AI training sets, if you had watermarked your audio file or your images, and you wanted to keep them out of or search to see whether they're in the training set or exclude them from the training set, does the watermark help in some way? I mean, yeah, go ahead.
So first of all, when you say if, we are a Digimarc Validate customer. Part of the reason we raced to get this product out is because we wanted it for our own use to protect our digital assets. So no, if we are a customer, but absolutely. So one of the things, again, regardless of whether or not the Gen AI engines take our safe, that is the name for our digital watermarking technology, our safe Digimarc, our safe watermark detection software, they're protected under DMCA 1202B and similar other laws in other countries. But there's so many benefits to the Gen AI companies for taking our detection software, which we offer to them for free. Because not only, going through the multiple benefits, first of all, if they're using digital assets that have CMI, including digital watermarking, including Digimarc Validate digital watermarks, they're in violation of the law. So that's reason enough that they should be doing it. Taken to the extreme, there's absolutely on the fair use side, we talked about those lawsuits earlier. All of these Gen AI engines are going to be spending a lot of money on lawsuits, and the outcome of this could be untold trillions, probably in aggregate, of damages, plus model retraining, if they're found guilty of all these things. So there's a lot of reasons to do it around complying with the existing law, DMCA 1202B, not playing a game of chicken with model retraining under fair use, which is an outcome for these companies. But there's other benefits. So one of the things is, as more and more content that they're scraping is itself Gen AI created without any human interaction, and it starts to get a little bit silly, they face model collapse. The example I give is, are you a Family Guy fan by any chance?
Yeah.
So you know how Stewie's head is shaped like a football?
Yeah.
Right. Well, if over time with iterations, if a Gen AI starts to make the human head more elongated in I was going to say in 3 years, but the way Gen AI is moving so quickly, it could be in 3 seconds. Gen AI is going to think humans all look like Stewie. Right. So they face model collapse unless they're actually having some way to automated and efficiently read a tag on a digital asset they're ingesting. And then there's a lot of other benefits. Again, the identifier that we're putting into a digital asset for the content creators benefit can also be used as a tag for training Gen AI, right? So maybe a Gen AI company wants to train on I don't know, they have permission to train on a company's advertising collateral, holiday collateral in a Spanish-speaking world.
Mm-hmm.
How are they really going to understand how to do that unless there is a digital identifier they can say, okay, find me all of these images.
Right.
So there's benefits to both the content creators, but also to the Gen AI engines. That's key to what we're doing. We're doing this. We believe regulation is coming. We believe there is some really powerful regulation that will be helpful. But along the way, the more we can do to make this a win-win-win for everybody, the faster it happens, and the better off everybody is.
Yeah. Just going back, you said that if a training data set contains a digital watermarked asset, it's in violation. Explain that again.
Yeah. So what I'd really suggest is that there's a lot on our website, digimarc.com. So digimarc.com on the DMCA 1202B. It is like all laws. I mean, there's a lot to it, and we're not lawyers. I'm going to make my chief legal officer happy by putting that disclaimer verbally in here. It's on our website too. Although we have a lot of lawyers in house, and we have some excellent legal scholars that we've consulted with. But for those really interested in understanding the ramifications of DMCA 1202B, we encourage people to go to our site because there's a lot of great information there.
Yeah. Okay. So can you give us some of the big use cases that you guys have handled
in the digital domain or
digital
across all of our business? So we launched. So we launched Digimarc Validate a week ago today. And again, the initial value prop that our customers are getting immediately is copyright protection by availing themselves of the protection available under DMCA 1202B and similar laws. There is some authenticity benefit, so we also offer web crawler. So one can go out, a customer can go out, use our web crawler and find where their digital assets are. We have extensions, web extensions, browser extensions, so they can see whether it's theirs by, again, looking for that identifier. The authenticity, the widespread authenticity conveyance is going to come with a partnership. So I mentioned C2PA. We're talking to other, we call them nodes, as we're thinking about where the detection sits out in the internet. Other big node providers, whether they're social media companies, whether they're e-com providers, whether they're device manufacturers. This is going to be, the way we look at this is, there is a real crisis on this copyright, and it's not just the content creators themselves. I mean, taken to the extreme, and I'm going to say this, but I need to preface this. We are big believers in the power of Gen AI. We think this is going to be the most important productivity tool since the internet. So we are fans of Gen AI, but it's just important whenever there is a change in technology, you can't just look at the benefits. You got to look at the risks, and the risks of not respecting copyrights. It goes beyond just the copyright owners themselves. It impacts all of us. So we're seeing this, with the strikes today and with some of these lawsuits, where if I'm a content creator, and this could be musician, this could be a movie producer, this could be a podcast host, it could be a company's creative, whatever. If I'm creating content and that content is allowed to be used without my consent or without my compensation, what is my motivation to continue to create content? And what is the single, probably, if you were to put a thematic bar chart of all the sci-fi dystopian horror movies, it's machines taking over. And that's exactly the path we are on when it comes to content creation. If human content creators aren't incentivized to create content, but machines can do it untethered with any human contact, just based on the exponentially increasing processing power and algorithmic power that's being thrown here, we're going to cede content creation to a handful of big tech companies and some state-sponsored bad actors. That's the path we're on. Now, again, I didn't mean to get dark there. I am a wildly optimistic human being. We believe in the power of Gen AI. We think this is going to be a wonderful productivity tool. We just got to address the risk. And so this idea of, well, I'm not a artist. Why should I care about copyright law? Because it's going to impact all of it. We are giving control to a handful of tech companies and state-sponsored bad actors unless we protect people's copyrights. That is a conclusion that's hard to escape. Fortunately, there is a solution. And going back to my natural sunny positive side, because I get excited when I talk about this stuff. I get excited when I talk about tech. What's really cool about this is the reason we're having this conversation today is because of the internet. Why did the internet came around? How was it invented, right? In the 1960s, during the Cold War, we needed a bomb-proof way to communicate. That was the crisis. How can we, with this specter of nuclear global war, how can we make sure we have communications up? The outcome of solving that crisis led to the 973 billion ways we use the internet today that we couldn't have fathomed back then.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with Digimarc Validate. The crisis of solving for copyright protection, and it is a crisis, is going to lead to something that the internet's needed for a while, and this is the catalyst, which is an ecosystem of trust, authenticity, and security. Because again, by solving for this copyright issue, now we can start to address the issues of authenticity that also need to be addressed.
Yeah, well, that was going to be my next question. But before that, if you have this watermarked asset and it's in a Gen AI training data set, does any of the watermarking survive the ingestion by the large model? And the reason I ask is and I'm sure you're very familiar with this, but if you use a lot of the image generation models, Midjourney or Stable Diffusion, or these, oftentimes the output has the artifact of an artist's signature in the corner. I mean, it's no longer rendered in as a recognizable signature, but it was in the training data. So does any of the watermarking survive in a large model?
Yeah, so the short answer is every engine is different. Every engine's constantly changing. It's impossible to give a universal truth to that, but I would go back to this, which is if they're altering, which I go back to digital watermark is a form of CMI, of copyright management information. If it's altered or removed, it's violation.
So it's not the fact that a digitally watermarked asset is in the training data that's a breach of law. It's the generation,
alteration or removal. It's the alteration or removal of CMI, copyright management information, of which digital watermarking is a legally recognized case, precedent example of CMI.
Right, but I would guess then that that deciding whether or not a generative AI image is altering or removing is a question for the courts, right? They could argue
altering or removing the CMI.
Well, let's say I have a song that I've digitally watermarked, or a painting that I've digitally watermarked, and or to make it more direct, a piece of digital art that I created that I've digitally watermarked. It's included in the training data for a big generative AI image generator. And then that image generator generates an image that has been influenced or includes elements of my original asset. Does that constitute a removal or mutation of the CMI?
Yeah. So again, I think maybe you're this is a new avenue, so I get the confusion. I think what you're thinking about is like transfer. I'm forgetting, blanking on the term now, but transformative use of does it change? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the output is. Digital watermark is CMI. Digimarc Validate gives you CMI, copyright management information. If that copyright management information is altered or removed, then it's a violation of DMCA 1202B and similar law. So it doesn't matter what the output of the engine is. If that watermark and again, without, it's impossible to give a universal answer because there are a ton of engines and the algorithms change almost every day. So, but it would be, I would give you a very high level. It is very hard to imagine an ingestion of a bunch of content with the purpose of creating other content where our digital watermarks would survive that whole process in totality. All they need to be is altered, and they're definitely going to be altered, right? So that doesn't mean they can't read. I mean, this is one of the wonderful things about our digital watermarks. If you go back to the benefits, right, because of both the ubiquity, meaning that they cover the totality of a digital asset, but also the redundancy brought by that ubiquity as well as the code itself, it can survive a lot of damage and still read. But if that damage, if it's done by a machine, is an alteration of the watermark, it's still damage. So it almost doesn't matter if it comes out at the end and reads or not. It's the alteration or removal of it.
Okay. Then on authentication, which, as you said, is becoming a huge issue. First of all, does this apply to video as well? Can you digitally watermark video?
We can. We haven't commercialized it yet to the point where we can have our customers do it. So stay tuned on that. So again, what we have today is image protection, audio protection, coming soon, video protection, and document protection.
Right. So, in an ideal world from your point of view, certainly, every piece of digital content produced would be processed with a digital watermark. So, if I, gave an interview, or let's say that President Biden gave an interview, and that audio was digitally watermarked, then you could say that every place you find that audio, that it's authentic. And if that audio is altered, you'd be able to see that it's been altered. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We talked about the two risks we see from Gen AI, and I really want to stress this because we are big fans of it. So there's a lot of benefits. Yeah. That's actually our journey. Humor me with 30-second journey of how we got here.
Sure.
Which was about a year ago. Like most companies, I hope. If not, I hope they're doing it now. Most companies, our R&D team had been aware of Gen AI and looking at it and doing some stuff with it. But as a business, we sat down about a year ago when it really became clear it was a technology that could transform businesses. And so we took a look, what benefits could we get as a company from adoption, and what were the risks that would come from our adopting. And it's interesting, right? We found numerous and various ways we would benefit. But the risks really boil down to two, and we've touched on this, but I think it's important to go back to it to get to where to answer your question. The two risks all boil down to is how do we protect our brand equity, our IP, our copyright, in a world where our digital assets are being consumed without our consent to create new content without our knowledge. So that was one bucket of risk. Mm-hmm. And the other one is how do we prove our authenticity? How do we let people know this is a Digimarc asset as opposed to somebody pretending to be Digimarc, right? We immediately realized the next step, which was, oh my gosh, this wasn't a risk of adoption. this was a risk of existence. Even people who weren't going to be aware of Gen AI, as quaint as that sounds now, we were actually having this conversation. Well, what if people aren't aware of Gen AI? What is their risk? I think now everybody is aware of Gen AI. But it was going to affect all content creators, whether or not they opted in for the Gen AI revolution. And because it was going to impact all content creators, whether or not they opted in for the Gen AI revolution, it was going to impact all of us, right? And that's when we got to work, because we knew that based on our history of being the pioneer and widely recognized leader in digital watermarking, our technology had a role to play. What's been wonderful since then is to see that become a universal acknowledgement. Case law, governments, big tech, all realize that digital watermarking has a role to play. So that has been great. The second realization, the reason we got to work with urgency, as I was talking about earlier, was there isn't a moment to waste. Every time a new digital asset is released, distributed or published without protection, that digital asset's gone forever. So we really wanted, I said, we raced to get it done, because we wanted to build this for ourselves, for our own digital assets. And we are a happy Digimarc Validate customer ourselves, but also because we wanted to offer this to other people because of the risks. We've talked about the risks of copyright and how it doesn't just impact content producers, it's going to impact all of us in this potentially dystopian computers take over the creation of content, defined history way. But the other one was authenticity, which I think is equally as scary. We are spending more and more time in a digital world. I mean, I don't think you probably don't need to tell a podcaster this, that how much time people are spending in the digital world listening, consuming digital media. If there isn't a way to convey authenticity in this world, we're going to head down one of two paths. Either people are going to believe everything they see, which is going to cause companies, news organizations, governments, individuals, societies meaningful and irreparable harm, because content creation is now fast, cheap, and easy. And anybody can do it, and people will do it, and they'll continue to do it for nefarious reasons. So that's one path. We're all going to believe everything we see, and it's going to be really divisive. The other one, I think just as scary, people are just going to stop believing anything they see.
Right.
People aren't going to tune into your podcast or be like, I don't know if this was Craig and Riley, or could have just been two machines talking. I don't care. And the internet and all digital media, it's not just entertainment. It's being used to convey really important and legitimate information. Now, I think I don't know which one of those is worse. Those are the two paths we're going down. To be clear, Gen AI didn't create this problem, right? 3 years ago, we would have been talking about deepfakes, right? So this is a problem. This was a path we were going down anyway. What's really cool about this is that, again, for solving for the copyright protection issue, we can solve for the authenticity. The solving of that crisis is going to be one step back with the crisis, one step forward solving the crisis, 500 steps forward, by delivering on the promise of the internet, which is a safe, authentic, and trusted place.
Yeah.
Digimarc Validate is going to make it as difficult to counterfeit people, companies, and news as we've made it to counterfeit the world's currency.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Another question. So you watermark your assets, your digital assets, and then you were saying that there are ways to scan the internet for instances of that asset, and if you find an unapproved use of that asset, then you get your lawyers involved, right? And that there's an infringement case or something like that. Is there a way, or is there technology, or are you considering this, that nobody can copy a digitally watermarked asset or create a new instance of it without some permission on the owner's part, and if they try to, it won't work. It'll it's a little bit like those PDFs that you get that are set so you can't block and copy the text.
Yeah, so that would involve more than just, that's a change of internet protocol, and to fully containerize it. However, we can provide a lot of protection along the way. Digimarc Validate is multi-layer. What we mean by that is it's not just about digital watermarks. That is what people are most aware of. That is the conversation people are having because, again, governments and big tech realize digital watermarks have a role to play. One of the advantages we have of having done this for 30 years, we can see the next step a little bit. We knew digital watermarks were going to have a role to play. The world is caught up to that truism. We understand the urgency to get this done now because once a digital asset is released out into the wild for the first time unprotected, it's gone forever. We're starting to see that realization dawn on people. Maybe they're a little bit still behind on that. But the other one is that this has to be done through a multi-layer system, and that's what we have because digital watermarks are an important component of it. But it's the same reason, you don't have one lock on your door. Right? You probably have floodlights in front of the door. You got multiple locks on the door, and maybe you have a dog who barks if the door is opened and you're in bed. Right? So it's the same thing here. It's going to be a multi-layer solve. Digimarc Validate is multi-layer. If you go to our website, I don't want to sound too promotional, but because it's not because it's Digimarc with a C, I feel like I need to, if people are interested in going to the website, I got to spell it out, which is digimarc.com. You'll see that we're launching early 2024 a registry, and they can click on there to be updated of that registry launch. And that's going to be a big part of what you're talking about, Craig.
Yeah, that's a distributed ledger registry.
Doesn't have to be distributed ledger. We are interfaced with distributed ledgers. It doesn't have to be. There's other ways to get security and comfort besides DLT.
Yeah, and so this idea of a mechanism that would prevent the reproduction of a digitally watermarked asset without some key or some permission.
Well, yeah. So you would see, without getting too far into the future and stuff, we're not quite ready to talk about yet because we don't want to tip our hand too much. But there's a couple of layers, not to use layer in a different term, different way. But for example, if there is CMI in an image and you alter it or remove it, it's illegal. That's not just for the Gen AI engines. That's for anybody. Right. So that was not a law that was written in 1997. Hey, Gen AI engines that won't be invented for 20 years that don't do this. Right. Secondly, it will be very clear with Digimarc Validate that an image has been altered or changed. Even, let's say there's a picture of you and I, and I put a knife in your hand. That would show up as an alteration. So one is there is protection under DMCA from people changing it. Two, we can show that image has been altered, that it has been changed in multiple different ways. And so going back to the point of whether Digimarc by itself can make any digital asset unalterable, that's a internet foundational technology change that we can't do. What we can do is make it so that people know it's changed. They can see, that this image is not what was intended. When Craig put this out, there was not a knife in his hand. It has been changed. And then it becomes, this is inauthentic. And so we can provide a layer for consumers to decide for themselves what's authentic. Well, here's a picture of Craig with a knife in his hand, and it's not from Craig. I can see that it wasn't, it's been changed from what Craig originally posted. It's probably not authentic.
Right. But in order to other than having seen the original image and seeing that it's been altered, you need this detection system, Digimarc's detection system. Is that right? To see whether or not something's been altered.
Yeah, and we're working with C2PA to get, there needs to be standards. This is exactly what C2PA, there's a wonderful organization. They came together for this reason. We're not, we're having conversations with other, like I mentioned, important nodes. You are absolutely right in that there needs to be, going back to the definition of digital watermarking, it's hiding information and detecting it, discovering it. So there has to be that detection event. So this is where we started with the copyright management with Digimarc Validate. That's immediate. That's available immediate. There isn't a required network effect. it's going to be a journey of interested parties. And what's wonderful is the reception, the urgency that people are getting to have this. So that yes, I'm not entirely sure if your question meant I would need to have seen that photo the first time. No, what it should be is you go on, pick your social media site or web browsers, right? W3C has a big role to play in this too, which is I know this image has been altered. I know this wasn't was intended. This is not an authentic image.
Yeah, and that detection software would presumably eventually be embedded if it becomes the standard. If Digimarc were the standard, would become embedded in search engines and maybe your operating system, or I don't know, but so that you would immediately see when as you scan digital assets, there
Yeah,
would be.
I think C2PA is going to set the standard, right? We're not going to set the standard. It's just not realistic, nor is it what we want. We want an ecosystem, an open, safe, authentic uh, ecosystem, and there's a real urgency to get there. We really these risks are real, and so we just want to get there as a society because we're benefits. I have 2 kids. They're on the digital world all the time. I have to remind them that the www does not employ a fact checker, and they get sick of me saying that. But anyway, so we're racing to get there with the group of with the we have multiple conversations going on with governments to provide our input to the regulation that's coming in multiple geographies. We're working with C2PA, but yes, there does need to be detection ubiquity in order to get broad authenticity conveyance.
Yeah. And can you give me? We're coming up to an hour. A few of the big use cases that you've worked on, specifically with digital watermarking.
Sure. So our work with the world's central banks.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I can't say that much about it because we're the Secret Service would probably join this call before it were over if I tried. But we work with the world's central banks to protect the authenticity. This is a 24-year relationship. We just actually signed a extension of that through the end of this decade. We're extremely proud of this work. When we talk about our mission as a company is to promote a prosperous, safer, and more sustainable planet. When you talk about safe, trust in global currencies is right up there, right? I mean, we're talking about spending a lot of time living in a digital world. That is a massive area that we need to help add authenticity. But currency is foundational. If we lost faith in our currency as a society, all bets are off, right? So we're really, really proud of that work. We have another product, Digimarc Recycle, where we can transform the sortation of plastics, and really excited we're making great progress there in multiple geographies as well, fulfilling our more sustainable part of our mission. So this is, as I mentioned, there was a business, we've since sold this business, but Digimarc at one point secured more than half of the driver's licenses in the US and
Mhm.
multiple secure credentials overseas. So this is what we've done. For almost 30 years, we have built massive multi-stakeholder, multinational, mission-critical systems of trust and authenticity. So this is just applying it in the digital domain, and we're really excited to be on this journey.
Yeah, but in the digital domain, is there a big use case that you can point to? I mean, currency. Presumably, you're looking at watermarking physical currency, and yeah, are there some use cases in the digital domain?
Yeah, so we've been our innovations and inventions have been part of the as I mentioned earlier, the Blu-ray
Right.
anti-piracy and the digital cinema initiative by Arbitron and Nielsen for their people measurement systems. And we do have customers that are using our technology in the image space today to track some of their um, um, assets. So
Yeah.
this is, as I mentioned, this is all things old or new again. This is how the company was started. A brilliant and wonderful human being named Jeff Rhodes started Digimarc almost 30 years ago to protect his images because he was a photographer as well as an astrophysicist and looking out and saying, I really want to share my images on this brand new thing called the www, and how do I do it and keep attribution, right? So this is back to our roots. This is back to our origin story.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating. And just going back on the standard, you're sort of standard agnostic, is that right? I mean, you have the process, and I don't know what the standard would be, but if there was a certain uh, standard for watermarking and reading or detection of watermark, your tech
We're,
could adapt to that, or are you a proprietary standard that the world has to adapt to in order for your products to be useful?
we're not going to change the world by ourselves.
Right.
We're not intending to change the world by ourselves. Even if we wanted to, we don't think the world has enough time. I mean, this is. I don't know if It's funny. I was thinking about the DMCA and some of the regulation outside of DMCA. DMCA is great, but if you think about when DMCA was written, I don't know this to be true, and I should probably look into it before I say it publicly on a podcast. But there is an argument to be made that some of these Gen AI engines have as much processing power as the whole internet did back then, right? I mean, it's possible. It's at least
Yeah.
order of magnitude probably right? And so I don't think people understand how quickly this is changing. I think this is your tagline, right? Where your world's
Right.
changing,
Right.
AI is going to change the world.
Pay
So
attention.
you get it, and yeah, so you get it. But so we don't want to do this alone. We don't think the world has time to wait, because it's unfathomably large how quickly things are changing and how permanently things are changing every day. So we're, like I said, we're in discussions with government officials. We are proud partners of standard setting organizations such as C2PA, because this is going to be an ecosystem. And what we want to be is we want to be a tool provider in that. We want to educate people on the power of digital watermarks, because, again, what's been wonderful is seeing people really coalesce around the view that, yeah, digital watermarks have a real fundamental foundational role to play in addressing the risks of Gen AI. That part of the debate's over, which sometimes takes a long time in these ecosystem and these standard setting things. People get it, so we're past that. Now let's figure out how we can all work together. And again, we're a mission driven company, and our mission is to make the world a prosperous, safer, and more sustainable planet. And this is a wonderful way to help.
Yeah. Okay. I keep on thinking of new questions. So I'll try and make this the last one, but this applies to PDF documents as well.
Yeah. Yes. So we will, again, not yet. The technology there, we haven't commercialized it yet, and we know. But yes, it'll be documents, PDF documents as well. That's one of the subset of areas of I don't want to get too far into that because we haven't released it yet, but that will be part of it.
Yeah. Okay, Riley. Well, that's all fascinating. And just finally, how do you price this, and is it affordable?
Yeah, well, I love that question, because it lets me end with what I wanted to end with. Visit us at digimarc.com, www.digimarc.com, and you can see our pricing on our website. There's a many packages available just for web sales to get going. And then we do have enterprise offerings that are beyond that, but there's great starter packs for any of your listeners who are interested in protecting their digital assets today.
And before you go, give Shopify a try. It's only $1 a month for their trial period, and you can sign up at shopify.com/EYONAI, EYEONAI, all run together, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/INAI to take your business to the next level today. That's it for this episode. I want to thank Riley for his time. If you want to read a transcript of the conversation today, you can find one, as always, on our website, IONAI. That's EYE-ON.AI. And remember, the singularity may not be near, but AI is already changing your world. So pay attention.